Hello and welcome to the RevOps Co-op, and we have a very special guest today. Stephen Moock is joining us to talk about a topic that is top of mind for nearly everybody right now, and that's product-led growth. Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Camilla. So I currently lead sales and success at Calixa, which is a platform that helps product-led growth companies layer a sales motion into their existing product-led one. I've spent the past decade in SaaS working in and around sales, and have seen a lot of the challenges that product-led companies have faced long before product-led growth was all the rage, and certainly getting the hype that it is today. So excited to be digging into that topic and chatting more about it today.
And I am old enough to remember pre-hype and when product-led growth was really a freemium partial version of the original. And now I've seen extremes go as far as everything's cloud-based, every interaction is going to be in the platform from signing up to purchasing. So what are the flavors you've seen, and where do you see, and I think where this really jumps out is, where do you see sales layered in those variations?
Yeah, definitely. There certainly are quite a few different varieties of the product-led world today. So you have everything from your classic free trial, sign up, use the product for 30 days, then pay at the end of that, to what's really propelled a lot of the kind of name brand companies like Slack, Calendly, Twilio, is really this freemium model. And I think to your question around how sales gets involved, it really depends on what type of product it is, and how users and teams get the most value from the product. So you think of like a canonical example like Slack, where you can start a Slack team for free. You might have a team that's shared with your friends or an enthusiast group, and you can remain on a free plan forever. You're not going to be able to take advantage of a lot of the freemium functionality, but you can use it. Now, where sales comes in is when you have a company that maybe starts with a free plan or one of their low-tiered paid plans, and they begin to add users over time, and the account begins to grow. Maybe as the company expands, they require more enterprise functionality around security or data retention. And those can be signals to a sales rep that's covering that account that, hey, maybe this is a good opportunity for us to engage and move them from a $100 a month credit card plan to a more substantial enterprise contract.
And I think that's where I see sales layered in so often, is on the enterprise angle. So we have companies, Chili Piper, Calendly, I know you mentioned, even Zoom, where the users really like the product, they get a license for themselves. It's usually free or very low cost. And then enough people at the company have the product that it makes sense. The salespeople on the enterprise team start reaching out to the administrator group to try to get them to upgrade to an enterprise account. I know when we were talking, you mentioned that a lot of organizations are beginning to layer in sales. They began as product-led growth. Can you tell me a little bit more about that scenario?
Yeah, definitely. I think the companies that have been really successful in this area already have a sales team that's kind of supporting or augmenting their freemium self-serve base. But I think a lot of the times we see with earlier stage startups, you have a technical or a product focused founder that thinks, hey, I build a product so good that it sells itself. That's, I think, like one of the classic Silicon Valley stories or dreams.
Well, and I'm old enough, I go to Field of Dreams, build it and they will come.
um, but yeah, so I think that a lot of people kind of start off thinking that that's how users will engage, and we've really seen that's a popular sentiment with products that are sold to developers. Developers love building code. They love finding solutions to their own problems. They don't love hopping on the phone with a sales rep. So I think it's really important that for companies selling to that type of audience or any audience, it's really around focusing the value of and the sales time on what is going to move the needle most. It's not a sales rep's job at a PLG company is not to engage with every sign up that is in their patch, or at a company that's in their patch. It's really to find the highest leverage activities that can really drive up the average deal value, close bigger deals with more groups in larger companies.
And I hear a real opportunity for operations to help out in that arena if they can get their hands on product data and start figuring out what kind of signals are conducive to those upsells. But before we get into more detail there, would love to talk about, a lot of research has come out, and I know we mentioned this briefly when we were first talking, but a lot of research has come out where like 43%, I think is the last number that stuck in my head, B2B buyers don't want to talk to a salesperson. And originally, PLG, you mentioned the very tech founder, tech forward people thought of this as a death knell for sales. What are you seeing? Like, what's real here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's shifted the mentality and the role of sales. In the old world, sales has a lot more control over the buyer experience, right? You're in charge of offering someone a demo. You're bringing in resources to help them get started and start using the product. Whereas now the consumer, the user, ends up they come to you with that expectation that they're going to be able to do all of that on their own. So I think a lot of traditional salespeople can have sort of a negative reaction to that at first, like, hey, I'm giving up control of the deal. But I think the really successful sales reps have shifted their focus, and they know that, hey, I'm going to focus my energy on the people that are most eager to use our product more, or to invite their colleagues, or are championing the product throughout their org. So it shifts the focus of the sales rep. But ultimately, I think that actually is a pretty big net positive, right? If you have visibility into what a prospect is doing and like what value they're getting from your product, that gives you such a leg up over the competition.
Yeah, and another trend I've seen, I will always prioritize buying from the salesperson who tells me when not to buy. So if I'm not a good fit, if the use case that I am trying to use this for isn't the right fit, and they're able to explain why that may not be a good match and when it would be, that is so valuable. So I'm seeing the consultative role do really well with some products. What exactly should companies expect the salespeople to own in terms of the buying process? Like, where's that line drawn between product and person?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great way to frame it. Typically, or I guess we've seen this kind of emergence of a new criteria or a new stage in the typical lead to customer process. In the old world, you have marketing qualified leads that convert to sales qualified leads. Product-led companies are now thinking about product qualified leads and product qualified accounts, which is essentially layering in some activation criteria into your lead qualification. And so you're really taking the product usage data and then marrying that or looking at for the intersection between that and your firmographic data. So is the company in my ideal customer profile? What is like, are they in my enterprise segment? Are they in my SMB mid-market segment? The intersection of those two is really where sales should be spending the majority of their time. Those are, the ripest leads, if you will. But then there's also the kind of the absence of usage, or the maybe customer fit is high, but they're not sticky or they're not engaged enough. That can also be a good signal for a sales rep to maybe involve the onboarding or implementation team, or get a power user to do a peer education session with someone. So I think it again changes the way that you're thinking about the data, but a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah, I've seen sales people pivot and involve the customer success team to try to get you using the product. And every time I'm like, I see what you're doing, I know why you're doing it, and I still love it, because you're ultimately you're getting more value as a customer, and that's always a good thing. So let's talk a little bit about how businesses need to look a bit different than the traditional sales-led growth model that a lot of SaaS companies were built on in B2B. It seems like we're seeing buyer behavior change and we're seeing seller behavior change in this product-led growth model. Do you see a shift in the dynamic between sales and marketing? I'm just thinking about how vastly different B2C and B2B are when it comes to marketing in particular.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to call out. I think we've seen this unification of the buyer and customer journey for some time. 5-8 years ago, there was a big focus on when a SaaS buyer goes from pre-sale to post-sale, we need to make sure that handoff process is super smooth and dialed in. And some companies definitely still struggle with that, but I think now there's the big focus on we don't think about a marketing lead and a sales lead differently. It's they're a potential customer. So I think there's so much more that will unify the awareness all the way through activation, through becoming a paying customer, that entire journey. And it does change the way that sales works with marketing, and how they work with post-sale customer success. Like I mentioned, PQLs, that's a metric that it changes the way that sales and marketing are kind of talking about leads. It's not marketing has a qualified lead and sales has a qualified lead. It's just a unified thing that also product has input on. So I think that's a big change. I think it also, another big shift is in the way that companies staff their go-to-market teams. You brought up a really good point earlier where, you've seen sales people bring in customer success maybe a little bit earlier on to make you feel like you're getting the support you need. We've actually seen companies build out customer experience or onboarding functions that are purely focused, they're in the revenue org, but they're purely focused on making sure that users convert into power users and help drive deals forward. So it's pretty exciting, how that's changing for a lot of businesses. We're also seeing kind of this model of always be helping. So a sales rep, their focus first and foremost is to, get people happy, seeing value from the product before they end up, charging money or asking for a commitment, certainly. So yeah, a lot of interesting changes there.
Yeah, and what I've seen, so in B2C, marketing owns the P&L, and they have this huge responsibility because they're the ones getting in front of the audience, getting people excited, and there's not a sales team to excite people and get them to engage with the product. When you have a SaaS business where, and I'm not saying sales is going away, that's not what I'm saying at all, but a lot of times I'm seeing some of the KPIs that marketing is responsible for be more on the front end, like how many signups they get, where the signups are coming from, and free trial based rather than being tied as closely to the product signals. So have you seen that as well, or am I just jumping ahead here?
No, no, I agree. I think there's a focus in metrics or a shift in the metrics that companies are focusing on where, kind of going from the product metrics. I guess actually, this is like an interesting trend that we're seeing even from last year during peak VC hype cycle, startup valuations at all-time highs to now where there's a focus on this concept of doing more with less that everyone's talking about, and essentially improving the efficiency of the sales team. Whereas I feel like the PLG companies typically would focus on new signups, activated users, retention of those users, how engaged they were, how many times they were logging in on a weekly basis. And now I think those companies, they've realized that there is a cost to serve your freemium or your free user base, and it's important that there's also a focus on what percentage of those free users convert into PQLs that are ready for sales. How do we take the free user base and improve the pipeline, ultimately the revenue that's generated from that? So it does. I liked your call out about like how the parallels with consumer B2C orgs. There's definitely a shift in how these PLG companies are focusing on it.
So let's dig a little bit more into the KPIs, because I think I'm hearing so much opportunity for revenue operations to dig in and really help when it comes to identifying your ideal customer profile and all the personas you're going to be dealing with, and then identifying, it's not the demand generation funnel anymore, but identifying a sort of funnel structure that looks at different points in the buying cycle to figure out conversion rates and how to optimize efficiency there. Are there other, are those the correct places to be looking, or what are you seeing in PLG companies when they're trying to maximize that efficiency quotient?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, it's defining, those PQL criteria. And usually that's when someone signs up, it's the first point that they've kind of experienced that aha moment. And so I think from a product usage perspective, it's important to be able to track that and have that data available, either in your CRM or in a tool like Calixa. That's typically the first key thing that a company should focus on defining. Then, like I mentioned earlier, you likely have different segments or different tiers of leads within that product qualified stage, where you want to route the ones above 2,000 employees to your enterprise org, and between 100 and 2,000 to the mid-market org. So a lot of the times we see a focus on enrichment, where you have your product usage data that's stored in the CRM. You might be using an enrichment tool like a Clearbit or a ZoomInfo. That's also either getting sent to the CRM or to your warehouse. But really, it's kind of defining that first pass of what the ideal customer is at each milestone, and starting to think about how you would equip sales reps with that data.
So I may be a little biased because I live in the CDP world, but do you think the CRM? So what I'm thinking, where I'm seeing people struggle a lot is figuring out with PLG, what's an opportunity? How do I track all of the orders? Like what's system handled versus user handled? Where do we make those separations? Do you see people implementing that really well with yesterday's CRMs, or do you see people trending more towards kind of a hybrid between the CRM and a data warehouse or CDP?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that everyone is at a slightly different stage of figuring it out. I wouldn't say that anyone is like, oh yeah, we have it perfectly dialed in. It's always an iterative approach, but um, of the companies that we work with that I think are doing this really well, they all have either a CDP or a data warehouse, some both. It's not uncommon to see people with Segment and Snowflake working in tandem. Um, some of the data will be in the CRM. I think it's common for RevOps teams to push as much data as possible into Salesforce.
Yeah, which I understand as a past Salesforce admin, but also makes me cringe a little bit because Salesforce is so, they resource guard for great reasons. They need things to be running really quickly and smoothly. So they limit the functionality you can have in terms of processing and reporting. So I understand the reflex, but part of me is like, think about it a
Yep.
little more. Maybe we can have a best of both worlds situation where we have like the big processing power happening in the warehouse and then pushing the end result into the CRM.
Exactly, and that's really part of the reason why Calixa exists in the first place. CRM traditional CRMs are not built for to give sales teams visibility into this product-led motion. So they're great at being the source of truth for who owns an account, what the account hierarchy is, what open opportunities are there, but I think in the modern, there's this concept of the modern data stack. It's like everything should integrate with the CRM and the data warehouse, but Salesforce is just not going to be the tool for everything.
Right. Well, that was the nerdiest question I'm going to ask. I think. So let's talk a little bit about what PLG companies, what missteps you see commonly in the, we're not going to name names. So like there's really good behaviors I see. Like I think of Asana's little unicorn celebration when you complete a task and how that makes the end user feel good, and Canva's celebration of your first design or your second project to get you excited about maybe upgrading.
Yep.
What are some things that maybe aren't done so well on a pretty consistent basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I think that there's several companies that I've signed up for and started to use that haven't totally nailed like their onboarding email flow. And it's the like automated emails that are kind of like product owned, but also the sales led emails that are maybe somewhat automated, somewhat personalized. And I think that's a big area of or opportunity for improvement for a lot of these companies. Part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that there's kind of shared ownership between the product team and the sales team. But I think there's a lot of sales teams that aren't really using the data that they have available to make the emails more effective. And I won't name company names here, but like one example that comes to mind is, hey, I've been a power user of this product, and I'm probably using it more than most of the other folks at the company. And the email that I receive from a salesperson is like trying to get me to upgrade to their next plan without like indicating any of the reasons why, like why, even though they have it's a company that I know has a lot of data on how I'm using their product. So there's just clear opportunities for improvement.
Yeah. Yeah. And some companies do that so well, so the gap is noticeable. Like I think of even Grammarly that I use quite a bit as a content writer. they tell you how much you're using. You're using this more than 99%
Yep.
of, you know, like,
Makes you feel good and like, oh,
right.
cool. I'm getting rewarded. Like I'm a power user. This is cool. Yeah, HubSpot does really well. They have paywalls all over their product, and their emails are pretty dialed in when you hit one. Like they're gonna send you resources about what that feature is going to offer to your team. So some people definitely do it really well, but yeah, a lot of people they're still trying to figure all of this out for the first time.
Yeah, and it just feels to me, as somebody who's been in SaaS and marketing for a long time, like maybe we've stepped a little too far away from the customer and aren't asking for feedback enough. Because usually customers are more than happy to tell you what they like and don't like, as long as you do it in a respectful way.
Yeah.
So, you know, the product led is wonderful and data is wonderful, but sometimes you miss out on some of the context you can get out of a good old conversation.
Yep. Exactly.
Stephen, is there anything else you'd like to add before we talk about where we can find your product and how to network?
No, I think yeah, I mean I've enjoyed the chat here. And yeah, I don't think I have any other topics that I wanted to discuss.
Wonderful. So tell us where we can find the company and you on LinkedIn to network.
Yeah, so again, my name's Stephen Moock, Moock. You can find Calixa at calixa.io, Calixa. You can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.